Okay, here's our graphing calculator example. We're going to try to solve 3x minus 2y equals 0 and x squared plus y squared equals 4. So just like our others, we're trying to solve for x and y, figure out where these two lines would intersect. So to do this with the graphing calculator, I'm going to be entering them into y equals. Let me get my calculator ready here. And so we want to enter both equations here in y equals, okay? If you have anything in there, you can clear that out. But in order to do that, our equation has to be in y equals form. So we got to do some rearranging. Let's take this first equation and try to get y by itself. Let's see, I'm going to move this 3x over, subtract that to both sides. So now I have negative 2y is equal to negative 3x. And then I'm going to divide by negative 2. So y is equal to, let's say we got two negatives there, so they'll divide and make a positive. So y equals 3 over 2x. Y equals 3. Let's do parentheses on this. 3 divided by 2 to enter that as a fraction times x. Or you can go 1.5x. That's also fine. For this next one, again, trying to get y by itself, I'm going to take away x squared. So you can see there is a difference in this equation, right? It's got the squareds on both the x and the y. If there was a square just on x, well, then that's a quadratic. That's something that we've seen dozens of times. It's going to be a parabola. But if you have a squared on x and y, I think we did see a couple of these way back towards the beginning of the year, but that makes a totally different type of graph. So we'll get to check that out here in a second. So you got 4 minus x squared. And I point that out just to point out that it will be different, right? It is going to be something other than a parabola. So we want to make sure we are careful and seeing something that's not a graph that we've seen many times in the past. So we get to this point. We still want to get y by itself. Sorry for the shaky camera. I'll try to stabilize that a bit. So I'm going to take the square root of both sides. And when we do that, we're taking the square root while solving, and that's going to result in two answers here. So we're going to get the positive and negative square root 4 minus x squared. Now, if you're thinking to yourself, okay, well, let's take the square root of 4 and the square root of x and get 2 minus x or something along those lines, well, that is incorrect. You can't take the square root there. It has to do with order of operations, but anything that's inside the square root, those operations have to be done first. So before you can take the square root, you actually have to do that subtraction. And since we can't do that subtraction, since they're not like terms, then we're just stuck with what we have right there. All right, so this is our equation. Now that's a plus and minus. That means we actually have two equations when we enter this into our calculator. So we're going to enter one for the positive square root. So square root 4 minus x squared. And then another for the negative square root. Put the negative out in front. 4 minus x squared. All right. I can't see my phone screen, so I hope you can see the calculator. Okay, yep, there we go. All right, so now let's look at the graph. I don't know. My window settings are probably fine, but I haven't used the graph in a while, so I'm just going to reset my window settings. As a reminder, you can do that by hitting zoom, and then it's your sixth option down there, Z standard. That's just going to set it down to the window settings down to the standard negative 10 to positive 10 for your x and y axis. And let's see what we have. So that's our first equation. That's the linear line. Now you can see that first upper oval, that was the positive equation, the positive square root. And then on the bottom, there is our negative square root. And so this makes this kind of oval looking shape. That is actually a circle. It looks a little stretched out. That just has to do with the pixels essentially of the calculator and the screen, the aspect ratio, to use some fancy terms there. But the screen's wider than it is tall, and so the space between one of these x points here on the scale is wider than the space between the y scale. So that's why it's a little misshapen, but it is actually a circle. It goes out to +2 on the X and the Y axis, positive axes, and then it goes out to -2 on the negative X and Y axes. So it's a circle. We can see our line cutting through that at 2 different locations. So we should expect 2 different solutions on this. All right, so we're going to find where these lines intersect. So to do that, to help us out a little bit, make sure that we can see this okay, I'm going to zoom in on my picture. So I'm going to hit zoom, and just that second option, zoom in. And I'm just going to zoom in right there on the origin. I can move my cursor around, and that's going to say, zoom in on this specific point, but I just want to zoom in right there on the center. So it's at the origin, I hit enter, and we can see a little bit better picture of that. Okay, so now to figure out where these lines intersect, I'm going to go to the Calc menu up above Trace here. So you hit second and then Trace. All right, and then I think we've used this menu before to find like our vertices, maybe some zeros. We're going to use that intersect option number 5. All right, and that's going to tell us where 2 of our lines are intersecting. Move this to the center a little more. Okay, so when we hit that intersect button, this is what it shows us. We have a few pieces of information here. So up at the top, it tells us which equation we are currently selecting, which one our cursor is on. So if I move my arrows left and right, it's just going to stay on that same equation. I'm attached to that first y equals equation, 3/2x. Okay, and I move left and right, staying on that equation. And then you can see the coordinates changing. That's great. We don't really need those coordinates for much right now. But then it does say, it's asking for the first curve. Curve doesn't mean an actual curve, it just means one of your lines. What's the first line that you want to select? It's going to then ask us for the second line, and it's going to tell us where those 2 lines cross. Okay. So I do want to figure out where my linear line is crossing this circle up here. So yes, I want that 3/2x to be my first line. So I hit enter. Okay, and now it's jumped me up to this second y equals equation, y2. That's our positive square root 4 minus x squared. Okay, now it's asking for the second curve. Now again, I can move left and right, and it's just going to stay attached to that, that circle. I don't really need to move that to a specific place as long as it's on that line. Now if I hit the up or down arrow, well, now it's changing me to a different line. I hit the up arrow and it took me to y1. Okay, well, I don't want y1, that was my first line. I hit it again, okay, now it's taking me to y3, so that's my negative square root. So those up and down arrows, that's what's going to let you cycle through your different lines. So we have our linear line for our first curve. We want this upper circle for the second curve. We'll hit enter. And it's asking for a guess. Guess really doesn't matter unless you're intersecting at more than one point, which we're not for these 2 lines, right? The linear line and that upper circle are only intersecting at one point, so the guess really doesn't matter. If you are intersecting at more than one point, then try to move that guess close to where they are crossing. So I just went ahead and hit enter. Now it's giving me the intersection point. So x is 1.1094004. Y is a similarly long decimal. So that's going to be our first answer. Okay, so first solution is 1 point, let's go out to 2 decimals, 1.11, comma 1.66. Okay, so then I'm going to hit clear, and it just closes out that intersection menu. Now I'm going to go back to second and then trace, and just run through that whole thing one more time. Okay, hitting intersect. Now we want to get to this point down here at the bottom, which is kind of covered up by our words down here, but I want to make sure that I'm using my linear line again for my first curve. Yes, I can see that that's the equation that's selected, so I hit enter. Okay, now it's asking for the second curve. Right now I'm on that upper circle, that positive square root. I don't want that one, I want the negative square root. So I'm going to hit either the up or down arrow until I have that negative square root selected. Second curve, yes, that's what I want, so I hit enter. Asking for the guess, again, doesn't really matter. So I'm going to hit enter from there, and it should give us our second solution. Surprise, surprise, it's the same coordinate just in that third quadrant. So I guess you could say it's the opposite coordinate. Negative 1.11, comma negative 1.66. Okay, and that's where those two equations are intersecting. That is the solution to our system up here. All right, there you go.